Welcome to Hollywood Latest Reports. For nearly a decade and a half, the story remained buried beneath layers of unspoken respect, family loyalty, and the unwritten rule that some moments inside ministry circles were never meant to be discussed outside them. Yet when Ragan finally chose to speak, the ripple effect across the Christian community was immediate and impossible to ignore. His voice carried a weight that only time, maturity, and years of personal growth could produce. What he revealed was not a scandal, not a conflict, not a controversy, but something profoundly human, deeply emotional, and unexpectedly illuminating about the relationship he shared with Loren Larson, the man many have known only through his preaching, teaching, and public ministry presence at the Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge. The revelation was not about exposing a hidden wrongdoing or uncovering a buried secret. Instead, it shed light on a pivotal moment that shaped both men in ways neither fully understood at the time. Ragan began by explaining how the story dated back to a period when he was still navigating who he was within the ministry world, unsure of his voice, uncertain of his path, and wrestling with the pressures of stepping into a calling that came with expectations he wasn't sure he could ever meet. Loren, he explained, had been far more instrumental than the public ever knew. People saw Loren as a preacher, a teacher, a father figure, a mentor to many, but what shared was a glimpse behind the curtain, one that revealed a side of Loren that even lifelong supporters and followers had never fully seen. It was a story rooted in compassion, frustration, discipline, and a type of fatherly firmness that is rare in an era where confrontation is often avoided for the sake of peace. But for that confrontation, or rather the uncomfortable conversation that took place, became the very moment that altered his trajectory. The story, as told it, began during a season when he felt spiritually dry and personally overwhelmed. Life had placed him in a complicated position. Ministry demanded strength while his private world demanded healing. The pressure was immense. He spoke of long nights, endless self-doubt, and the silent battle to appear composed in front of the church community. He was still young. He was still learning. He was carrying burdens he didn't have the courage to verbalize. And yet, in the midst of that, he was expected to perform, speak, lead, and represent something he felt he could barely hold on to. According to Loren saw this long before he ever said a word. It wasn't a dramatic collapse or an obvious breakdown that caught Loren's attention. It was the subtle cues, hesitation in Paris's voice, the forced smile, the way he lingered in the back after services, the deep sighs he thought no one heard. One evening, Loren asked Paris to sit with him after a service had ended. At first, Paris thought it would be a typical pastoral conversation, the kind filled with encouragement, prayer, and gentle reminders about trusting the Lord. Instead, Loren went straight to the point. Something Paris admitted caught him entirely off guard. Loren told him he was worried, not about his performance, not about his preaching, but about the condition of his heart. He told Paris that he saw him struggling, not in the way others might judge or criticize, but in the way a father notices the unseen weight on his child's shoulders. Loren didn't scold him. He didn't lecture him. He simply asked him one question: how long have you been pretending you're okay? That question, Paris said, shattered him internally. It was the first time someone with spiritual authority had recognized his silent battle and had the courage to call it out with compassion instead of criticism. The moment was raw. It was emotional. Paris described how he tried to hold himself together, but Loren gently insisted that he drop the facade and speak honestly. What followed was a conversation Paris remembered in vivid detail even after 15 years. He recalled being unable to speak at first, the pressure of years of unspoken emotion rising to the surface in a way that felt both terrifying and liberating. Loren didn't rush him. He didn't push him. He simply waited. When Paris finally spoke, the truth poured out. His insecurities, his guilt, his confusion about his calling, and his fear of disappointing not only the ministry but God himself. He admitted he felt undeserving, unprepared, and unqualified, wondering if everyone around him saw something in him that he couldn't see in himself. He confessed his worry that his weaknesses would one day be exposed, and all the people placing expectations on him would realize he wasn't who they thought he was. Loren listened quietly, and when Paris finished, Loren said something that became the cornerstone of his healing. He told him that God did not call him because he was qualified. God called him because he saw what Paris couldn't yet see in himself. And then Loren delivered a statement that stayed with Paris for years. Strength doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from surviving what should have destroyed you. That line hit Paris harder than anything he had heard before. It reframed his entire mindset. It wasn't just wise advice. It was permission to be human, to be flawed, to be vulnerable. It was an acknowledgement that God chooses people who are still broken, still learning, still growing. That moment was the beginning of a transformation Paris didn't fully understand until much later. At the time, it simply felt like emotional release. But in the years that followed, as he developed into a preacher with his own voice, personality, and testimony, he realized that conversation was the turning point. Paris revealed that Loren never spoke publicly about that night, never used it as an example in his sermons, and never hinted at it in discussions. And that was part of what made it so impactful to Paris. The moment wasn't meant to be a teaching illustration. It wasn't meant to be shared or praised. It was pure pastoral love, one man stepping into another's suffering without expecting recognition. Loren carried that moment quietly, respectfully, as if it belonged solely to Paris's journey. And for 15 years, Paris carried it in his heart, unsure if he would ever share it with the world. Paris explained that the reason he finally chose to speak now had less to do with nostalgia and more to do with recognizing how many people today are silently walking through what he walked through back then. He said he sees the same emotional exhaustion in young preachers, worship leaders, and believers who feel forgotten by God because they struggle inwardly while outwardly serving faithfully. He wanted them to know they weren't alone. He wanted them to understand that even the strongest among them had moments of collapse, doubt, and fear. And so, by sharing the moment Loren never publicized, he hoped to extend the same compassion he once received. In recounting the event, Paris also spoke about how his relationship with Loren evolved afterward. He said that although they didn't reference that night again directly, something changed between them. There was a deeper understanding, a silent respect, and an unspoken bond. Loren became not just a mentor but a safe place, someone he could look to without needing to justify his struggles. Paris admitted that there were times later in life when he faced new challenges, family pressures, ministry burdens, spiritual dryness, and often remembered Loren's words. They became a grounding force, a reminder that God sees beyond failure, fear, and fatigue. The story, though deeply personal, also revealed something significant about Loren's character, his ability to see beyond the surface, his discernment, his empathy, and the way he valued people more than performance. Many online viewers expressed shock not because the story was controversial, but because it was so profoundly opposite of what people often expect from leaders in high-profile ministries. It showcased humility instead of pride, gentleness instead of authority, quiet influence instead of public display. And for many, this glimpse into the private heart of Loren Larson deepened their respect for him. As Paris's revelation continued to circulate, people responded emotionally, sharing their own experiences of spiritual leaders who stepped into their lives at just the right time. The story resonated not because it was dramatic, but because it was universal. Everyone knows what it feels like to hide pain. Everyone understands the burden of pretending to be strong. And everyone longs for someone who sees them without judgment. Loren was that person for Paris at a time when he needed it most. Paris concluded by saying he believed the timing of this revelation was not accidental. He felt God urging him to speak, not to elevate Loren or himself, but to remind people that the strongest testimonies are sometimes the ones never spoken publicly. He emphasized that vulnerability is not weakness, and that true leaders are those who look past the mask and reach for the heart. He reflected on how the world today is filled with noise, opinions, criticism, expectations, and how the simplest act of compassion can change the course of someone's life. That was the heart of his story. Not fame, not drama, just a moment of divine connection hidden in the quiet corners of human struggle. In sharing this long-guarded memory, Paris opened a door for healing in others. People wrote that the story gave them hope, reminding them that God uses ordinary, flawed people every day. Others said it encouraged them to stop hiding their pain and seek the help they've avoided for years. Many simply expressed gratitude that someone finally admitted what so many feel, that ministry is hard, life is heavy, and even those who seem strong sometimes need someone to speak life into them. What Paris did was more than tell a story. It created a space for honesty, a space for reflection, and a space for believers to recognize the beauty of unseen moments that shape destinies. After 15 years, this was not just a revelation. It was a reminder of the quiet acts of love that build the backbone of faith communities. It was a story about two men, one conversation, and a lifetime of impact. And for the thousands who heard it, it became a testimony in itself that God works in whispers, in quiet rooms, in late-night conversations, in unseen tears, and in moments that never make it into sermons or spotlight messages. Paris ended by saying he hoped that somewhere, someone who feels like they are drowning behind their smile will hear his story and understand that vulnerability is not defeat. it is the doorway to strength. He hoped they would find their own Loren, someone who sees their struggle and says the right words at the right moment. And above all, he hoped they would realize that God still works through people, still orchestrates divine appointments, and still uses conversations to change lives in ways that may never be announced publicly. As Paris continued reflecting on the story, he revealed that the impact of that night didn't surface all at once. It unfolded slowly, almost silently, across the years that followed. He explained that sometimes God plants a seed inside a single conversation, and it takes time, months, even years, before a person realizes how deeply it changed them. That's exactly what happened with him. For a long time, Paris went back to life and ministry believing he'd simply had a heartfelt moment with a mentor. But as the pressures of life grew and new seasons brought new challenges, he began to understand that Loren's words had prepared him for things he didn't even know were coming. He recalled one particular season, years later, when he faced one of the darkest periods of his personal life. He didn't specify the details, but he hinted that it was a time filled with emotional exhaustion, spiritual dryness, and a sense of isolation that nearly pushed him to walk away from ministry. During that season, he felt like everything around him was collapsing, relationships strained, confidence shaken, and faith tested in ways he had never experienced. And in that moment, the memory of Loren's statement resurfaced. Strength doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from surviving what should have destroyed you. Paris said those words became his anchor. He clung to them through nights of prayer, moments of doubt, and times when he questioned whether he was still called to serve. He realized that the conversation from 15 years ago wasn't just encouragement, it was a prophetic reminder that God equips people long before the battles even appear. Loren had seen something in him that Paris couldn't see at the time. A resilience, a calling, a depth of character that would only reveal itself under pressure. Over time, that understanding changed the way Paris ministered to others. He became more compassionate, more patient, and more willing to sit with people in their brokenness. He said he found himself repeating the same wisdom Loren once gave him, sometimes without even realizing it, and every time he saw someone's eyes fill with relief or tears, he understood why God allowed him to walk through those struggles. His pain became ministry. His vulnerability became someone else's breakthrough. His story became a bridge for others who felt lost. Paris emphasized that this is why he finally felt led to speak publicly after all these years. Not to highlight himself, not to spotlight Loren, but to remind people that God places the right voices in our lives exactly when we need them most. And sometimes their words echo across decades, guiding us long after the moment has passed.